So thank y'all for coming. Been spending a lot of time in Texas. I guess that's why I'm saying y'all. My name's Jeremy Bendat. I'm with AWS Premier Consulting partner called Corp Info. The San Francisco community is one of the most, if not the most, advanced community of Amazon users here. So in talking to the Amazon teams, we found out that figuring out ways to drive innovation by helping you save money within your console is something that's a real sticky point. So if we can give you an excuse and free up some budget to try something new, that's really what's going to help drive and push your companies forward. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. And with me, we have Tim Fox, who's head of managed services. And Tim, why don't you share your background?
Yeah, so I've been in IT now going on for over 20 years, and I've sort of jumped into the whole concept of the cloud about 5 years ago and sort of embraced it in its entirety. And that's kind of how I ended up at Corp Info and what we're trying to do today. So,
perfect. So first, I just want to give you guys a little bit of a background about Corp Info. And I'm sure that some of these things make sense, and you might have some questions on some of them. So AWS actually offers their own certification program. And at Corp Info, we happen to have 100 of these certifications running across our team. And we really encourage not only our employees to do that, but we encourage all the people that are actually leveraging AWS today to go and challenge yourself to actually get some of these certifications. So, I mean, if you could.
Yeah, we actually have quite a few people that have actually gotten all 5 certs that are working out today, plus those people have taken some of the beta tests. So we're expecting to have at least 5 or 6 people that have all 8 certs in a very short order of time. So, and a big part of that is getting a good understanding of how Amazon works and how you can actually leverage it in sort of an evolving sort of IT environment. But part of that has to do to the fact that we've been around for 30 years, as Jeremy said. And in that 30 years, we've kind of done a variety of things. So you're not sort of getting the company that's sort of born in the cloud. We've actually been there and we've done that for a variety of different businesses over the years, but sort of realizing the shifts that occur in IT and jumped on the latest one, which is probably the largest single shift that we've sort of seen in IT today, and that's the shift to the cloud.
Absolutely. So just by a show of hands, has anyone here actually gone through any of the AWS certification programs, become an associate architect, or even taken on the challenge of becoming pro? Yeah, a few people around the room. So there are some great programs out there. We typically recommend Cloud Academy and a Cloud Guru, and we actually help to enable that for a lot of our customers. So if you guys have questions or want to find out more about how you could go about getting certified in the training and what that would entail, come talk to us after the event. So through our partnership with AWS, we've been a part of the migrations, migrating over 70,000 servers to date. And so what that means is that we're not only doing the standard lift and shift over into AWS, but also helping to re-architect our clients so that they can take advantage of more services within the cloud. So if they're not leveraging things like code deploy, code pipeline, we're looking for that sticky point to help drive that innovation. And through that experience, we've actually got a pretty cool list of customers as seen here. So we can go through a list of war stories, and what we really like to think is that we can enable our clients by taking the experience that we've learned here and helping you guys not make some of the same mistakes or cross some of the same challenges that they've encountered.
And we've seen customers from all sizes. We have the small guys that are maybe billing $5,000 a month to customers that are billing over $500,000 a month. So we've sort of seen the challenges that all these different types of companies are actually going through and what they try to do to sort of make it all work. And it really, as we came here to talk about, it is about the cost, and we'll get a little more into that in a minute.
So, some of the cool stories that we like to share are 2 sort of big events, and I think that they'd probably cross into each of your lives in some interesting way. So one of them was a Super Bowl halftime story where Samsung was trying to actually figure out how people were experiencing the halftime show. Were they leaving it on and turning up the volume to party? Were they changing it over to the Puppy Bowl? There might have been a lingerie bowl at the same time, I don't know. But they were trying to figure out how are their customers actually watching and ingesting the game. And they came to us and they said, hey, we want to figure out a way to leverage AWS and some of the analytics engines that are in there to be able to say, here's what our customers are doing, and this is how many of them are actually watching. So we ended up using AWS and scaling up their infrastructure to be able to take on 500,000 concurrent users per second.
We've had other customers, for example, when Star Wars premiere came out, they were getting ready to actually sell tickets. And the question was, how were they going to deal with the volume? So we came in and assisted them in being able to scale up their environment so they could deal with the onslaught that occurred the day and weeks leading up to the actual premiere of the new movie.
So through that challenge, we had about 15 years worth of movietickets.com infrastructure. And within 2.5 weeks before it went on sale, they said, we want to move all of it to AWS. So depending on what your current struggles are or current challenges, or maybe some sort of launch that you have ahead of your organization, that's where we want to come in and help share that experience to say, here's how that type of really impactful event can actually be really smooth through proper planning and by using the right tools within AWS.
I think another part of that is once you actually get out there, we have the experience in sort of talking with companies on how they can actually scale and what the cost means for them. Because a lot of times when you're getting out into the cloud, you have this idea that maybe it's going to be cheaper in actually doing it, but then you sort of find out, well, wait a second, there's some sort of challenges in actually how you do that today. So some of the companies we've worked with have done full migrations of upwards of 1,000 servers, and are sort of living that. They were trying to do a data center replacement, and now they've done that. What do you actually do? How do you actually run in this new sort of paradigm and sort of really make sure that it's cost effective and you're actually matching the needs that the business has?
So part of that is starting at the foundation layer and just making sure we're walking you through what are the best practices as far as setting up AWS. And we're actually going to get into that a little bit today, but we do have some driving forces behind this.
And when you've been to an AWS event and when Amazon talks about this, and you think about the fundamental shift that's sort of occurring in IT today, these are the things that come up. They're common terms and phrases that we always hear about it. And the big one is really talking about the service over the server. We really don't care about the server names anymore. All of us that have been in IT for any length of time can tell you about the war stories about trying to figure out, well, what cartoon characters are we going to use to name these servers? Or what Greek gods are we going to use? And the reality is today, that no longer matters. If you really want to make sure you're having an environment that's going to be up all the time, then you need to not care about that as much. You need to start caring more about what does that individual service do? How do I ensure that it's running all the time? It's that concept of sheep over pets, right? How do I have an environment that, if I have to go ahead and have a server killed, it doesn't matter to me. I don't have to concern myself with the service going down because I built it in such a way that it's going to either self-correct or I'm going to have other things that sort of deal with it. And it really is down to what we mentioned before, is that concept of meeting the business need. It can't just be in the business of being IT, right? The reality is we've become too much so on a commodity side, and we have to have a belief for the business that we know what we're doing to help them sort of evolve. And that means really sort of fundamentally looking at what we're doing. We're not running servers. We're not running services. We're providing the means by which a business needs to grow. So, and a big part of that, especially for us, and especially in IT, everyone loves this statement, which is we want to make sure that somebody is actually bringing us a problem and not coming to me with a solution. In my early days, way back when I was doing desktop support, somebody would come to you and say, well, I need a bigger computer. Well, why do you need a bigger computer? What are you going to do with it? What amount of time are you going to save? Why are you storing a gigabyte of pictures on an accountant's computer? These types of things. So don't bring me that solution. Tell me what your problem is, and let us sort of figure that out.
And through the cloud, we're able to become incredibly efficient at the types of services that we're actually leveraging. And that's why we have this slide that says, only pay for what you use. And that's what we're really going to be driving home today as we get later in the slide deck. But these are our capability areas at Corp Info, and we can walk you through every single one of them, starting at the beginning when it comes down to what is your overall cloud strategy? What are you trying to achieve? Is it a simple proof of concept where you're trying to say, hey, we're trying to leverage AWS for X, Y, or Z reasons? Or we've already made the decision, we need to go to the cloud in order to stay competitive because all of our competitors are doing so. And we want to find the best way to do it and leverage a partner to help accelerate our path there.
So the first part of that is really, as Jeremy mentioned, what's the cloud strategy? What is the reason for actually going to the cloud? Sometimes it's top down. We've seen the fact that a board has come in and said, you know what, we hear about this cloud thing, we think it's really neat, go make it happen. Other times we sort of see the shadow IT piece of it. People that have sort of started dabbling in their own AWS accounts because they think it's quicker and easier to get things going. So you sort of see it from both standpoints. And we understand that because we see it from all the different types of customers we have where we've gone in and done really small projects for a company where all we're doing is migrating their marketing infrastructure, yet they're a multi-billion-dollar company running hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of IT, and all they're spending is basically $5,000 a month on a marketing site. But the other side is you have the full migration, where we're going to migrate it all, and we're now going to start spending $600,000 a month on Amazon, whereas before we had 6 data centers. So what is the strategy that really goes behind that? It's sitting down and talking with our customers about how that actually works, what they're trying to accomplish. Again, back to what we said, what does the business need from this?
And so when we talked to you guys and we mentioned that the San Francisco community are some of the most advanced AWS users that we've come across, it's how do we leverage that same strategy to make you all more efficient within the existing infrastructure that you have today. So that could be through a number of things. That could be through automation. That could come from being a support arm to your organization, which is why we offer the managed services. Or it could come from security, where you're constantly having to go through these rigorous security checks, and how can we make that a more efficient, standardized, sort of fenced-in process so that your board, your community, when you're going through an audit, you're not concerned on anything because you know that we've helped to set those gates up for you.
So, what we've listed here are the capabilities that we have today across the board. So these are the things that we've already done that, we have referenceable customers to tell you what it is we can do because we do this. We live this. We breathe it. Mass migrations, moving 1,000+ servers out there. Data analytics. We've helped customers build specific pipelines using Redshift and to actually build out a product they can now give and sell to their customers. We help design that. Automation piece. We have a very robust DevOps program where we actually go in and help customers build out automation for whether it's for data pipeline, it could be for substantiation of systems, a variety of different things. We have actually quite a few projects we've done over the years. More recently, this is sort of a big area. As everyone knows, we sort of hear about the concept of DevOps and what it means, the culture of DevOps, but in practicum, how do you apply that? How do you build automation to make sure that you're getting systems that are built consistently reliable every single time? And of course, Jeremy mentioned we do managed services. And managed service, really what that means is that you can sleep at night. It means for those people that are out there actually running an IT environment, you pass it off to us, and we have the engineers and people that are working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to actually respond to issues and problems. So that means they're actually logging on to boxes, figuring out what's going on, trying to resolve those issues, and if they can't, then they escalate to you. But the whole idea and the whole concept there is we're trying to make sure that IT groups as well as companies can sleep at night knowing that someone's actually guarding the sheep.
And one of the differentiators with Tim's managed services department is that they actually take a proactive approach to helping to manage the environment and find ways to cut the right corners so that we can become more efficient at supporting you. Because if we're not having to constantly be waking up and doing things on that 24/7 basis, that makes us more efficient and your organization more efficient. And Tim was actually recently featured on the This Is My Architecture video series. Recommend everyone check it out. It's actually hosted on aws.amazon.com/thisismyarchitecture. And that is actually one of our managed services clients where we've been taking a proactive approach to re-architect them as we support them.
And lastly, the area of competency, which really is sort of important in today's environment, is we all look at the newspapers every single day and we see how many people have been hacked, is really talking about security. And how does that apply to your environment? And the security can be more than just, I'm setting up IAM roles. It can be a little more complex for that. We have customers that actually have HIPAA compliance, PCI compliance. They all have the complexities that go into ensuring that they're either meeting regulatory concerns or internal controls that they need to have in order to ensure their business is functioning. And we have the expertise and understanding to how to make that work.
So as we continue to drive this conversation forward, one thing that AWS is constantly harping on is what's called the well-architected framework. And that basically is a program that they've put together, and there's actually about a 70-page white paper that anyone can download on their website, which talks about how to architect a best practices cloud architecture on their platform. So it covers 5 basic pillars. It's pretty black and white. So it's security, reliability, performance efficiency, cost optimization, and operational excellence. So what we try and do when we're taking a company on the journey of going through the well-architected framework, we're looking at each one of these pillars. But today, we're actually going to single out and focus on cost optimization.
The whole concept here in terms of driving innovation, as Jeremy mentioned before, is if we can help you save money in how you're actually spending on Amazon or in how you've architected your environment, that gives you the flexibility to then use that capital to actually do something different. to initiate a new project, to pour it into hire more people. All the things that sort of make us better and make the business grow can be driven by the fact that if you can save money in what you're doing and how you're running your architecture, then you can utilize it in other ways.
So we take two approaches to cost management. And the first is a data-driven approach. We actually leverage tools and also enable our customers with tools to help them better understand what's actually happening on a day-to-day, month-by-month trending basis within their architecture. The second approach we take is a more qualitative approach, where we're actually asking you guys the questions to say, what is it your business or your technology is trying to achieve, and how can we make that more efficient when looking at it through the lens of cost?
So the data-driven approach is the most basic piece. And if you go look out there today, there are quite a few tools that can help you sort of diagnose and understand what you're doing on the cost side of things, right? How are you identifying idle resources or unused resources? It's looking at RI purchases or things that might be misconfigured. All of those particular pieces. But the other part of it is you can't necessarily take that information in a vacuum. You actually have to apply some other sort of fundamentals to it to better match the things we talked about before. Just a simple concept. If I want to take and I want to right size a system, and I'm looking at the Amazon console and I see that I'm only using 10% of the CPU, the realization is there's other things that can apply there. How much memory am I using on that box? Am I really network bound? Am I using the right size system for the type of interactions I need to have? All of these things sort of go into that, and you can't necessarily get them by just looking at the data. You have to overlay that with an understanding of the business, so doing sort of the qualitative piece of that.
Absolutely. And part of that, beyond just the data, and you'll look at number 6 and 7, we have storage strategies and content distribution strategies. And that's something where we'll find clients that just have thousands of dollars being spent in S3 and they're not actually accessing that data. So a simple thing like setting up automation to move it over to something like Glacier is a really simple cost-saving strategy that can be impactful immediately without necessarily changing anything within your architecture. Same thing with the content distribution strategy. If you're not leveraging CloudFront today, if you're simply doing data transfer out, you're spending probably 2 to 3 times more than you have to be.
And the way we sort of come to this is by sitting down with our customers and really getting an understanding of what the business is trying to do and answering some of these questions to help guide you and give you some suggestions on the best things that you should actually look at that can save you money overall.
It's almost like a forensics where we want to not only talk to yourselves as the business owners or key stakeholders, but also people on your teams to see what it is that they're trying to achieve. And then from there, we'd come back with a report to say, here's what we're thinking. Does this make sense? How do you want to move forward? And then come up with an execution plan together. So now we're actually going to do a cost optimization demo that Tim is going to drive. I can nominate you for that, right?
Thanks.
Cool. So through a cost optimization demo, how would an interview actually drive that piece of innovation? And it'll come from a combination of the tool we've described as well as us sitting down with you.
So part of that is we're going to start off and ask some of the most basic questions that you would expect to have answered in IT. Like, what are you doing for your backups? How do you actually expect to recover your information? How long do you need to retain information? What type of security policies do you have in place? What type of architecture diagrams do you have to actually define what it is you're actually doing? So these are the types of questions we're going to sit down and ask our customers, and they're hopefully going to have an understanding. We're also going to ask some tougher questions sometimes. And some of it, I'll give you an example, is asking a question, well, who's in charge of that particular application that can actually give you that answer? And strangely enough, a lot of times customers have no clue. They don't know. They know that somebody's built it, they know somebody's deployed it, they know that it's important, but it really comes down to who defines how that application works, what the requirements are for that application. They have no clue. And it can be more basic than that. Do they have an expectation for how customer-facing applications should respond? Do I need an application that can actually respond in sub-100 milliseconds? Or is it okay to have a customer have to sit there and wait for 30 seconds to get a response? And if you start to think through these questions, you start to have an understanding of how you're actually architecting your environment to better match the business need. You're not throwing hardware at a problem that you may not need to throw hardware at. So these are the types of questions we need to get answered. And they're tough questions sometimes. A lot of times customers don't have any clue. They can say, well, we know we have backups. Well, how long do you need to retain the backups for? Do you have regulatory requirements that require you to retain them for 6, 7? We have a customer that has a data retention of 100 years. So they need to understand what that's going to mean, how long are they going to store it, and based off of that, they can then start to get predictive in the amount of storage they're going to need over time, how they're actually going to access that. All of these things lead into that quest of really getting to cost optimization.
And again, and part of it is not just thinking about the infrastructure today, but where you guys are trying to go. If we understand your future vision, or an application or workload's future vision, that'll help us not only to plan what we're doing today, but to make sure that it makes sense going forward, maybe even up to 100 years.
Yep. So the next thing we're sort of going to get into is we're going to show you a little bit of sort of the sausage making here and how we actually interact with a customer. And from that standpoint, we're actually going to show you some of the tools we use today. As I said, there's quite a few tools out there that actually do cost optimization for you. And it isn't just a matter of looking at the data. It's actually answering the questions that we pose to you about how you're utilizing systems today. And the most common one that everyone always comes to is the very first question is, how are you using idle resources? Do you have a really good way to sort of identify how that works today? So from our standpoint, we actually utilize a tool called Cloud Checker. And Cloud Checker gives us the capability to sort of answer some of these questions on what's actually occurring. So I'm going to show you some demo information we have for an account, which is our own dev account. And what this actually does is, if you haven't used Cloud Checker or Cloud Health or any of these, it actually goes in and analyzes your account. You actually give it access through IAM to actually do read-only, and it actually pulls back information, not only from the detailed billing records, but also from what's actually inside of the Amazon account to actually give you a detailed understanding of the inventory. So in this particular case, we're looking at a dev account. We can say that we can save $4,000 a month. And the first one to notice is that we have Redshift accounts, or Redshift clusters that we're basically doing nothing on. You know, we can save $900 a month by just downsizing them. And that's sort of the first question. But again, it's back to what I mentioned before. Well, what are we using it for? Does it always have to be on? Do I have to have specific performance parameters that maybe aren't necessarily being shown by just looking at the CPU utilization? You know, do I have memory requirements on that particular system that may mean that I have to have a larger set of memory because I'm going to do large sets of queries some point in the future? They're going to blow me out if I try to downsize it. But again, it's not just a matter of looking at the tools. It's thinking through the business and asking the business these questions. What are you using it for? It's not just a matter to say it exists, it's there. You have to define what that is. That goes for RDS instances, DynamoDB tables. Which ones are we doing writes to? Which ones aren't we doing writes to? Am I optimized in terms of the types of writes I'm doing as compared to the types of reads? We have one customer that when we sat down and had a conversation with them, it became quite apparent to them after we talked for basically an hour that they were upside down. They were actually really, really write dependent and almost never read the data. So if they optimized it, they can save money by doing that type of thing. But you don't necessarily think about it, right? And that's where we come in. We have the 100 plus certs. How many years of experience?
220.
220 years of experience in Amazon. I know that sounds like a lot in a short period of time, but it's basically a combination of all the experience we've had over the years to actually do this.
And what's really cool about Cloud Checker is you'll actually notice that instance tags, and this is why a tagging strategy is so important to cost optimization, they all actually appear here. So we'll be able to help make the determination as to what instance or instances you are running that maybe you shouldn't be, that you thought someone had turned off or killed off, and they don't need to be running anymore. And even more importantly, you might think that, hey, Redshift isn't actually a part of our strategy at all, but we're running it. Who did that? And you just had a rogue developer who wanted to try a data warehousing strategy. And how do you actually lock that down? Through leveraging things like Service Catalog, where you're giving your engineers specific parameters they're allowed to work within? Or is it an IAM strategy where you're saying, hey, this is the type of environment that they're allowed to access? So sometimes taking that holistic approach just by identifying things that are idle can really help save money and help you develop an IT strategy.
So we can talk a little bit later about how there are some other strategies with regard to idle resources and what you can sort of do there. But again, this is sort of always the sort of low-hanging fruit piece, right? How do I determine what it is? But as I said, it's not always an easy answer just to look at, oh, the CPU is really low. You need to answer some of the other questions around what that application is doing, the expectations the business has for the response for that application to make sure you're doing it correctly.
And one thing I'll note, and I know this writing is kind of small, is we actually have an ebook that we're going to be distributing as a part of this. So you'll be getting all of this, so don't try and copy all those notes down. But that'll be something that, if you fill out the survey, we'll email it to you after the event.
So the second part of that, as we mentioned, is the unused resources, right? Where I have things that I'm spending money that I shouldn't be. Do I have Elastic IPs that aren't attached to anything? And a big one, I'll give you an example, is we had a customer that had a huge number of unattached EBS volumes. When I say huge, we're talking to the tune of $20,000 to $30,000 a month of volumes that are sitting out there that nobody's using. And that's a huge amount of money to basically be spending. So you have to look at that kind of thing. And it is a bit of looking at where do you actually see that, and that's where Cloud Checker sort of comes in. And as I said, it gives you that understanding of the idle resource of unused resources, whether it's load balancers, volumes, unmounted EBS volumes. But again, how does that affect your business? Maybe you have unattached volumes because you take snapshots, you set them off regularly, and you actually use them as your location for doing database backups. And I've seen this on a customer. For example, doing Oracle backups, they prefer to have them online on an actual disk, but they only attach that disk when they're actually doing the backups. But unfortunately, the disk has to exist. If any of you have had to live through sort of doing EBS hydration, you'll know it's always better to have a disk existing, having already hydrated itself, than trying to spin up a new instance and hope you can get the same performance out of it. I have really big war stories about that, but I won't go into it. So that's one of the things you have to sort of think about. What are the implications for that? Do you need to have it always there, always available? And it may be the same with the elastic IPs, because you've defined what those IPs are because you're communicating with a third-party vendor that has to have a whitelist for those IPs, so you don't want to give it up, so it's unused. But looking at this isn't going to answer for you. You have to answer the question, what is the business need? Are we meeting it? So, and that is part of what we're going to have that conversation about, is sort of force it, right? That's one of the things we become good at, is sort of a forcing function to ask the questions of the business, of the people running IT, to say, are these the correct things? Are we doing it the right way? All right, so the next part of this, once we've looked at the unused resources, is do you have misprovisioned resources? So the big part about this one is, as you all know, oops, come on, you can do it, there you go. It can be not just about the size of it, but, did we talk about it? Sorry. But also, are we using the latest and greatest of things that we should be using? A year ago, we went through and we said, all right, this is what we believe we need for the amount of CPU, the amount of disk, amount of memory, the network optimization. But then a year later, we aren't even thinking about that. So now we have this system that's been out there for 18 months and don't realize that by simply turning it off and turning it back on with a newer instance type, it may give us the exact same parameters and, of course, a faster CPU, we're actually saving money. So that's one of the things we don't necessarily think about. And part of the question that we're going to bring to you on an ongoing basis is, are you thinking about these things? Are there times when you're actually going through and auditing your environment to see if you're actually answering all of these questions?
And this is also understanding the behavior of the application. So if we are able to leverage things like auto-scaling as opposed to having your instances running all the time, we want to look at that and help to enable that dynamic capacity or capability within your account. Same thing with leveraging things like Spot instances. And there are tons of really cool use cases for leveraging Spot. And sometimes just by identifying if something is misprovisioned or it's just running all the time, we can identify and then push forward a Spot instances strategy.
So here's a question. How many people out there are actually using Spot instances today? Got a few of you. I mean, do you realize, for those of you that aren't, is it really more of a concern about not having an instance running, or you don't have an application that's actually designed to be able to, as we said, be a sheep as compared to a pet? Because that's really the big instance. You're only given a few minutes. You can shut down the Spot instance, but you can use them. And there are companies out there that can actually help you do that. We partner with them. So we actually partner with some of the companies that can help build out infrastructure for you to always ensure you have an instance running, but will leverage the Spot market for you in any instance you need to ensure that you're actually saving money. And that's a big difference. I mean, some of these instances can be 40, 50% off if you're using the Spot instance market. That can be a huge savings in a given month. But again, is your application built in such a way that can actually sustain that? And that's a tougher thing to know and or answer. And sometimes we can't answer it because, back to the problem I stated before, you know, Bob, who built that 6 months ago, is no longer here, so now we don't know what we're going to do. So it is a tough thing to sort of force the business to sort of shift in that particular environment.
But again, through data and through sort of that asking you the right questions, we can help to enable your strategy in that way, even if it does take some time and some deep forensics to help you save money. So sometimes a short investment up front can pay benefits really long term.
So we already talked about the sort of right sizing. One of the things that sort of gets missed a lot of times is looking at how you're actually utilizing storage. And this is a big one that I've seen a lot of customers sort of make a mistake on. And while we may have expectations and have regulatory basically requirements that define the data retention we have, are we actually adhering to those in the correct way? Give you an example. Is one of our customers, as I said, has a 100-year retention. And reality is they're a life science company. They basically make a device that goes in a human body. So it has the data on that device has to exist as long as that device does, which basically could be 100 years or more, depending on the life of an individual. So they have to retain all of this information. And it became quite apparent that all they were doing, for example, on backups, is taking that information and shoving it in S3, which is great. It's a good place to store things. A lot of the modern backup tools will automatically connect to you and store things. But they weren't taking advantage of the simple thing of using lifecycle policies. So lifecycle policies allow them to move data that they don't need to frequently inaccessed first, and then from there to Glacier, and can save a huge amount of money by actually doing that on an ongoing basis. Because they aren't pulling this data back. Remember, that's one of the best things about Glacier, is that you get the advantage of actually shoving it out there, and you only pay for a very small amount for them to store it. You only have to pay for it when you actually pull it back. Are you leveraging that kind of thing? But again, it goes back to that simple question, are we meeting the business need in doing that? If the company comes back to me and says, you know what, a 4-hour wait time to get a file back isn't acceptable, then we need to understand that. And asking those questions, getting an understanding of the business, will better understand how you actually do that today. So this is a big one, is when you're looking at things, look at your S3 buckets. Look if you can apply lifecycle policies. I will give you a little tidbit, just so you know. When you do that and you apply those in your Amazon infrastructure, you will not see them in Glacier. They still exist in S3. Just as an FYI, one of those things we learned the hard way. So it's just so you, but it's still there. So when you actually look at your monthly bill, you're actually going to see it under your S3, but you're going to see that it's taking advantage of Glacier and the cost advantages there, but you aren't going to see it in the buckets on the Glacier side. Just so you understand the sort of difference there. All right, CloudFront.
So CloudFront is Amazon's content distribution network. So we actually have a really cool program in place with CloudFront if you're not using it today or you have questions on it, and we'll be able to answer some of that. But to make a long story short is you have a few ways of getting data out of your infrastructure. One is through leveraging Amazon's data transfer out. And the other is by actually adding CloudFront to your account and sending it out that way. So that uses a series of edge locations located strategically across the world that'll help get your data faster to your clients. So if you're running a website, if you have some sort of download service, we definitely recommend using CloudFront. And we can talk to you a little bit about the program we have in place after the event.
So it may sound strange, but to understand how does Edge affect sort of your customers as well as how you're going to save money, well, you have to answer the question, where are your customers, right? So if I'm using US West, yet my customers are actually located in Europe, CloudFront's actually going to be a huge advantage for me because it's actually going to push that data out there, and I'm actually going to spend less money using CloudFront because it pushes it to the edge. This is one of those that I think a lot of customers overlook is they don't look at it. They don't look at how their data is getting access in S3, if there are ways they can actually save money by pushing it out to CloudFront. And they can. I mean, it's really a huge difference. We've seen some customers that sort of realized it and started saving as much as $10,000 to $20,000 a month by making a subtle shift. Because they're not actually getting it directly from the origin, they're getting it from the location closest to the end user. They're only having to pay that last mile distance there, not for the full transit around the globe for where that user exists.
And the coolest part is that your customers actually receive the benefit too. You get the cost savings, and they're getting access to that data faster because they're accessing at a closer location.
So this is one of those ones we talked about before where the concept of saving money basically builds innovation, right? So imagine that. You're saving money by doing this. Actually, you're giving your end users better performance. It's kind of a win-win across the board. But it's one of those that may not necessarily sort of come to the front of mind in a way that you can actually save money, in a way that you can actually help your customers at the same time. And there's a lot of that here. As I said, when you start to think about your business, you think about what you're doing, a little bit of a broken record, but think about how you're performing and what the expectations for that customer is. And sometimes that means making them up on the spot. You can be wrong, right? We all hear that we want to be wrong. Be wrong. Say we've decided that 300 milliseconds is an acceptable time for our customer until somebody more authoritative comes along and tells you, no, that's not. live with it, make something, build it. You can adjust. That's the advantage of Amazon, right? So now you find that 300 milliseconds isn't acceptable. You need something faster. Now you can sort of define the environment, but at least you're putting a stake in the ground to sort of figure out where to go.
I know, and it's kind of curious that we're at an Amazon facility talking about Amazon right now, and we're trying to figure out ways to actually save you money and take money away from them. But that's really the culture that Amazon embodies. And if you have had any experience with your Amazon account rep, they're always calling you, trying to get you to optimize your environment. So it's something that we, as partners, have also embodied and something that we get judged on. For customers that we work with, how efficient are we actually making their infrastructures?
And part of that is Amazon's belief that if they're going to make you happier, you're a happier customer, overall, eventually you might use more, right? It's that simple thing. Happy customers buy more things. And in this particular case, if we can help you save money, you're going to buy more things overall. And that really is what this is about.
And one of the cool things that has sort of come out of this cost savings conversation is we actually hired and have a position for someone called the Cloud Finance Manager, where he actually is interacting with our clients on a regular basis just to try and drive that cost savings conversation. And typically, that's not with the technology arm of your company. He's an accountant, and he's having that accounting conversations with your accounting or your finance teams, because sometimes understanding that OpEx versus CapEx conversation, how your bill is actually being distributed, leveraging tabs, doing custom reports, is what is needed to help sort of drive that innovation. And I've literally seen him at the end of the month email a customer and say, hey, if you make these recommended changes, we can save you 10 grand. And a customer will say, oh, I'll get around to it. The following month will come around, he goes, hey, if you made those recommended changes when I originally told you to, you could have saved 20 grand. And then by the third month, when he's saying 30K, they're like, all right already, we get it. We want to follow your recommendations. So part of that is finding out ways to stay close to the customers that we're working with, to continue to sort of beat the drum around cost savings through these recommendations and figure out new ways for you guys to innovate and save money.
So one of the last things to sort of bring to the table, and really quick, you probably have noticed we haven't talked about reserved instances yet. We'll get there in a minute. Because we all know that's a huge way to actually save money. But before we get there, I think some of the bonus things and the things that I would say to customers today that you guys need to really seriously look at, the first thing is tags. Why are tags important? How do tags save you money? Well, I will tell you, from some of our customers, they really want to understand where that money is actually going, what it's going to. For example, I have one customer that they basically built specific infrastructure for each of the products that they have today. The question that really came down from their board of directors was, how much does it cost us for every single user using that particular piece of infrastructure? With tags, we're able to get that answer. We're able to combine all of the costs associated with an individual product line and give them an answer at the end of the month, how much that's costing them. They then take the number of users or products that they actually have delivered. They can accurately say how much each customer is costing them on a given month. And that's a huge thing. Trust me, when your board of directors or your CEOs, your higher ups to really relay that back and understand the expense of something, and it's not necessarily the concept of bill back. When you talk about an enterprise, it may want to basically show a particular department how much their resources are costing them. It may just be the concept of show back. Show back being that concept where I can show someone how much it costs because they've made some questionable decisions about how they're doing things. Like, oh yeah, they have a 30-year retention for particular pictures. Does you really need to have 30 years for that? This is how much it's costing you. Do you guys want to rethink that decision? And this is that concept, but it all starts with tags and making sure you have a good tagging strategy. But beyond tagging strategies, how do you ensure that you have a good tagging strategy? And that's part of some of the things that we can sort of bring to the table for you, is we can actually show you some of the things that are out there today to ensure that you actually have those correctly in place, that you're actually getting value out of them. We've written some white papers, Amazon's written some white papers on what a good tagging strategy can be used for, and it's more than just, oh, we understand that this is a dev, we understand that this is prod. Now you can relate it back to department, you can relate it back to product line, you can relate it back to a particular project. We have one customer that specifically uses their tags because they bill their customers based off the running instances they have on a given month. So tagging is a huge thing, leverage that gets underutilized all the time, and customers just don't realize it.
And to take it a level up, AWS recognizes that this is a challenge that their customers have also brought forward as well. So even to take it a higher level, when you can have multiple accounts and have that all sort of under a consolidated bill, still, how do you manage that? And that's why AWS recently came out with organizations. So I think that launched as of this week, maybe. Yeah, launched this week. So if you do have multiple accounts, that's another strategy. But again, it goes down to that understanding of your bill, being able to organize that, and then report it back to your internal board of directors or to your customers from a billing mechanism.
Second is autoscale. So back to what we talked about before with regard to the concept of making sure that you have applications that are able to sort of deal with the fact that something is going to live or die. Autoscale is a great way to sort of ensure that you're actually getting the most out of your environment and meeting the particular needs. But it can be a tough challenge because you need to make sure that you're actually, again, meeting the expectations for how you're doing something. So what are the metrics you're using to drive whether you're autoscaling? Is it just a matter of CPU? Is it a matter of the number of connections? Is it a matter of the latency? All of these things can sort of matter, and it could be external pieces that go into it as well. Because autoscaling, at times, can be a bit problematic if you're coming in after the curve has already started. So if you have the correct metrics defined and you're utilizing them, then you can actually get your autoscaling to work in the correct way. You're going to save money because you're, one, getting ahead of the particular curves, and you know when those curves are done, so you can actually scale things down. The second piece of this is actually using Lambda. This is an underutilized piece that really gives you the capability to really only pay for an action when you actually need to take that action. So if you have a customer calling in, or if you have a particular, for example, you have a customer that's going to drop off a file in S3, then you need to take an action on that. Instead of running an instance that's running all the time looking for that, you can tie that to a particular Lambda script that actually looks for that and only fires off when it occurs. So now you're only paying for that on an event action, as compared to actually paying the hourly rate for running an instance that's actually going to take that. That's a huge advantage, right? Is being able to actually look at what you're doing today and drilling it down to a specific business instance and utilizing Lambda to actually make that work. And lastly, we talked a little bit before is about spot instances, underutilized. And as I said, we've partnered with Spotinst, to ensure that you can actually do that. And Spotinst gives you the capability to actually build ELBs that they help manage, and they'll ensure that systems are always running, whether they're running on Classic or whether they're actually running on Spot, to ensure you're actually getting the performance you need out of it. Alrighty, as I said, the one thing we didn't talk about was RIs. So let's talk about RIs.
So there's a few sort of simple RI strategies that we love to evangelize amongst our customers. But first, let's talk about what is an RI. So the easiest way to think about what an RI or reserved instance is that it's a coupon code. So you're basically buying the right to a coupon by committing to AWS for a certain period of time. And through that, you are then saving money. So there's a few different RI models they have. They have the no upfront model. They have the partial. They have all upfront payment. And now they have convertible RIs.
So I think one of the things that, as Jeremy sort of mentioned, is that RIs are a coupon code. And this gets a little confusing sometimes for people to understand what an RI actually is, because it really is a billing function, although it also is a reservation. So if I'm going through and I'm buying a particular M4 or 4XL in US East to my zone A, I know that I'm always going to have that available. But that also means if I don't have something running in that environment, I'm not going to get credit for it. But I'm still going to have paid for it. So it's a billing function. As long as you have one of those instances running, you will always get credit for that, as compared to paying the full book rate.
And when we think about the strategy behind an RI, you actually are not necessarily always locked into one particular type of instance. So we always encourage our clients to buy within a particular RI family. So if you buy an M4 4XL in US East, for example, you can move up and down within that M4 family. So you can get two M4 2XLs for the exact same price. And you can also move up if you've purchased multiple M4 4XLs and you need to then convert to an M4.8XL. So being able to understand that type of strategy is going to be extremely helpful depending on how elastic and dynamic your infrastructure is.
So the other question that comes is, well, what if I'm using auto-scaling environments? Well, because this is a billing function, it doesn't necessarily mean you're tied to a specific instance in itself to actually be running, as long as you have an instance type running in that particular environment. So that's part of what we try to do, is sit down with a customer and sort of look at what that is. Because it really is a little more complex than just saying, I'm going to run that server 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Because maybe that doesn't make sense. Maybe you're only going to run that system 20 hours a day. There's 4 hours where you aren't using it in the middle of the night, you're going to shut it off. But you know what? RIs might still make sense. Just because you're not running it 24 hours a day, there's still a break-even point where you actually save money. We can help you sort of look at what that is and get an understanding.
And again, that's a data point that Cloud Checker actually really helps give us. is we can actually see how the instances are behaving, and technology case also justifies the business decision to spend the money on that particular instance. And then beyond that, to talk a little bit about convertible RIs and something that is also new, which is enabling something called regional benefit. So convertible RIs are similar to moving up and down within a family, but you can actually convert your RI into anything as long as it's within that same region. And by enabling something called regional benefit, you're no longer tied to a particular AZ, but you can move and spread around throughout any AZ within that particular region.
So the thing about it is what is CorpInfo helping in that particular respect is, one, we're helping you to define what RIs you should actually buy. And that's through interviewing, and that's through having conversations with you, that's through looking at your bill, looking at the optimization of those particular systems. The second thing is, once you've actually purchased those RIs, what are you doing with them? Are you utilizing them? Are you underutilizing systems all the time? And we're going to help you on a monthly basis sort of look at that and help define whether you're actually getting the value for the money you've actually spent and what you're actually doing. Because that's a big deal, right? Is if you go ahead and you buy RIs, uh-oh, 3 months down the line, somebody's decided to turn that application off, you quickly get to the understanding that, wait, we're spending money where we shouldn't be spending money.
And so that's where that white glove mentality comes in, is that do you want to necessarily be the person or have to hire someone to help manage all of your AWS infrastructure, or is there an excuse to work with a partner that is literally living and breathing this stuff every day to help you do it and be more efficient and use the experience that we have to help you innovate and also to help a piece of this puzzle and take it off your plate?
So one of the questions that might come is, what happens if you buy RIs today and realize tomorrow that you bought the wrong ones? We've seen that happen. So we've sort of lived and breathed a lot of this and have dealt with a lot of the problems that many of our customers have sort of experienced in that concept and sort of help you work through them, because we understand and we've had the customers that sort of probably have had that problem. And we can help you sort of answer some of those questions.
So, all of this cost savings, I mean, it's great, but one of the challenges is, all right, we freed up all this IT budget. What do we do with it? And if I have all this extra budget left over, is one of the departments going to cut it because they're saying, hey, we need to figure out how to do more with less. And that's a conversation that we're used to having, but we also love to have the conversation about, all right, we just freed up an additional $100K off your AWS bill for the year. What is next? What are the services that we can take advantage of to help drive that additional innovation? And one of the really cool things that we're hearing a lot about right now is Amazon Athena.
All right, so driving innovation. What, ready?
Yeah.
All right, so as we've talked about before, a lot of this is really driven around the concept of you guys saving money, right? And what does that mean? Is once you've actually saved money, you can use it and do other things with that. That's really what it is. We live in a world where capital and money is really what drives our ability to actually make change. In being able to save money in your Amazon environment, especially because many of us are living in environments where we're automatically budgeting what we're doing for in a given year, we now get the opportunity to actually do something else with that. And that's a big change, right? If I can actually say, hey, if I can save the company enough money, I can actually spin up new servers, I can now do certain things. Or maybe I can actually hire more people. And that's a huge difference, right? Is we're sort of evolving the economy by getting ourselves to the point where we're saving money on what we're doing, yet we're innovating at the same time. Anything else you want to?
No.
Okay. All right. All right. Last place.
Cool. So we wanted to leave this remaining time, and we really appreciate you guys joining us today for some Q&A. So our goal today is really to help you as individuals and as companies drive innovation through cost savings, and also help to identify opportunities within your account. So there's going to be a few things that we're going to do. So one is, if you fill out the survey, we're actually going to send you the ebook that we reviewed quickly, and also give you a free account with Cloud Checker. And then if you guys want, we can also help to talk about various proof of concept programs that AWS offers. And beyond that, if you want us to take sort of that initial white glove approach to help look at your Cloud Checker account, ask some of those interview questions about what you guys are doing today, so we can help drive those initial innovation around cost conversations with you guys. The goal is that you have a lot of people that are living and breathing AWS every single day that are here to answer your questions, and the Loft has been kind enough to give us the space, I think, for the next hour to be able to drink as well as talk more about the cloud. So if anyone has any questions, though, that you think would be sort of good for the group, we're happy to hear them, or we can have these more one-on-one as individuals with a beer in our hand. Thank you all so much for coming. Appreciate the opportunity to chat with you guys.